All right, so now let's get to Antony. He totally rocked it. He kicked Brutus's behind. Now, part of it is he had the total advantage that he got to speak second, and Brutus was not there to argue against anything that he said, which we know puts you at a total disadvantage if you're speaking. What Antony did really well is, and we talk about argument and counter argument, and when you guys write an argument paper, you always want to consider the counter. What Mark Antony did really well is he focused his speech on Brutus's two claims. A lot of you notice what he said over and over again. He said the word honorable, and he said, was this ambitious? And that's not a mistake, because what he does is he works through his speech, okay, and he disproves what Brutus claimed. And some of you really picked up on that. But what I want to do is I want to go back, because some of you missed why he brought the bloody body. Some of you missed why he mentioned the will and didn't show it to the Roman public immediately. And what you have to do is you have to remember his motive. So if you go back in your book to page 52, we had his soliloquy that when he met the conspirators and the conspirators left and he was left alone with the body. And I read this part in class and he says, "Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest men that ever lived in the tide of times." And he says, "Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood." So he's saying, watch out. The men that killed Caesar, I'm going to get them. Okay? And he winds up saying, he makes his motive clear when he says at the bottom, he says, domestic fury and fierce civil strife. That's civil war. So he says, domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the parts of Italy. Blood and destruction shall be so in use, and dreadful objects so familiar, that mothers shall but smile when they behold their infants quartered by the hands of war. What he means is his motive, his goal is to get Italy into such fierce civil strife, fierce civil war, that mothers will hold their newborn infants that will be cut up, chopped up from war, and they'll just smile. He wants to bring the Roman public to such chaos, to such disaster, because we know if your country is a disaster, you can then rise to power. So that is his goal. He even says at the end, he says, cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. So if we go back to his funeral speech, we know he mentions honorable, and that's verbal irony. He starts off his speech saying that Brutus is honorable, but as he proceeds throughout the speech, he spends time proving how Brutus is not honorable. So when he says that Brutus is honorable, he means the opposite. The other thing he disproves and does a really phenomenal job at is proving that Julius Caesar was not ambitious. Because remember, Brutus claimed he was ambitious. So what does Caesar do? Some of you did a great job. He proves what everybody saw, that he refused the crown. That's the best proof he gives because everybody saw it. He proves that he brought captives home from Rome and shared the riches. That doesn't seem ambitious. So he spends time disproving Brutus, and in disproving Brutus, he wins. But he doesn't achieve his goal of civil war until he mentions that will. And he says, I have right here the will, which I don't mean to read to you. Well, that's like a friend saying, oh my God, I heard somebody say something bad, but I'm not going to tell you about it. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to beg to hear that information. And the Romans want to know. They want to know. They want to know. And he keeps them as a captive audience. So then why does he bring the body? Well, he could have just told them that Caesar was stabbed 23 times. But if you watch the film clip and you read the lines, you would know that he uncovers the body that has been stabbed 23 times and goes and points out exactly where each stab wound belongs to whom. You know, this is where Casca's knife ran through. This is where Brutus stabbed. Does he know that? No, he wasn't there. So why mention each conspirator and where they stabbed? Because that Roman public is going to remember. They're going to remember, oh, these are the ones that were involved. And then on top of that, the shock, the utter shock of the violence on Caesar's body is enough to get them enraged. So he mentions the will again, holds them off, and uses the will to the very end to let them know that each citizen will get 75 drachmas, okay? So that Caesar left each citizen a certain amount of money, which history proves that Antony made that up and they don't wind up getting the money. But he achieves his goal. He disproves Brutus's claims. He gets them upset and seeing the conspirators as butchers by showing them the body, and they know each person's name so they could seek revenge. And lastly, he gets them into such a tizzy, into such chaos, that civil strife does break out. And you're going to see that in scene 3. I think what you need to focus on is how Antony in this scene is really different than what we saw in Act 1. In Act 1, he was the one who says, when Caesar says do this, it is performed. Right? He seemed like just a follower. In fact, Brutus says, don't kill Mark Antony, for he is but a limb of Caesar. When Caesar's head is cut off, he can do no harm. And we talked about that in class. Antony's supposed to be a party boy. He can't think for himself. He just does what's told. But now we're seeing in this scene, in this act, he's a lot more, and he's a big threat. And what is Shakespeare setting us up to see? Well, we got rid of Julius Caesar because he might be ruthless. Well, I don't know, guys. Maybe Mark Antony is a little worse. So keep your eyes out for that. Read carefully. I wanted to make sure that you understood these points. I really miss you. It's hard being home for everybody. Just stick with it and find the good in every single day. See you soon, guys, hopefully.